I remember FTEO. I remember them in this order. And here's why. You as an admin do not get to control the order of the actions within your workflow rule. That's not something you get to control. But what we do know is that field updates run first. Field updates run first. So that's why I remember them FTEO. You don't get to control the order of the actions. Field updates run first. For my different actions, kind of one quick thing to know about for each one of my different actions. For my task, workflow allows you to automate the creation of a task record. The task object is the only object for which a workflow rule can create a record. If I need to create a record of any object other than a task record, workflow rule is not my tool. But it can create a task. That's a to-do item for your users. You can assign it to a user. You can specify a subject, a due date. You can add some comments. And then it's a to-do item that they need to mark complete. Here's what you want to remember about tasks. Tasks cannot be assigned to multiple users. Or what I should say is a single task cannot be assigned to multiple users. If a single task is assigned to a role with multiple users in it, Salesforce doesn't know which one of those users to send it to. So instead, that task gets assigned to the creator of the record that kicked off the workflow rule. So single task cannot go to multiple users. What about an email alert? Really common option that people use with a workflow rule. This is to notify someone. You can send an email notification to someone within Salesforce, a Salesforce user, and up to 5 additional emails. So at my old company, we had workflow rule email alerts, and some of those 5 additional emails were actually email distributions. If we wanted that team or that email distribution to receive the email alert as well. Email alerts are really helpful for alerting people internally, but they don't get stored as activity history on the record. And let me show you what I mean by that. I do not want to draw on this. If I'm looking at, I think there's someone, ABC Labs. If I'm looking at my activity timeline here, this is activity history. This is a sent email. But an email sent with an email alert doesn't get stored as activity history on a record. So if I'm sending it to a customer, I might want to do a second action that's a completed task that says such and such communication was sent. Because tracking those emails, tracking those activities is typically pretty important to most companies. Next, we have a field update. And this is another one that is very functional, very common with a workflow rule. A field update can update the value of a pick list. You could check a box. You could put a date in a field. You could clear the value of a field. When you create a field update, there is an option that asks if you want to re-trigger your workflow rules. Re-trigger your workflow rules. Why might you want to do this? Well, we already learned that you don't get to control the order of actions within a particular workflow. In addition, if you have multiple workflow rules on one object, which is quite likely because it's only a single if-then statement, if you have multiple workflow rules, you also don't get to control the order that different workflow rules fire. So workflow rules are what we call non-deterministic. You don't get to control the order of different workflow rules. Let's say that your field update might cause another workflow rule to fire, might cause the criteria to be met. Now, if you choose to re-trigger your workflow rules, this gives you the option for Salesforce to run through the workflow rules, run through and check again in case the field update would cause another workflow rule to fire. And then last but not least, you have your outbound message. And this is sometimes a point of confusion as well. With an outbound message, this is a message that goes to another system. So email goes to a person, outbound message goes to another system. Think about if you've ever ordered something on Amazon. Amazon kind of electronically packages up information about your order and sends it to the system that will process your order, whatever that order fulfillment system is. So this outbound message is kind of like a code message. That's what it is, actually, a code message that goes to another system. But with a workflow rule, you can send an outbound message where you yourself don't have to write the code. You yourself don't have to write Apex to send this outbound message. Again, email to a person, outbound message goes to another system. Then we have this option for time triggers. And again, I can't choose this option if I choose to evaluate a record when it's created and every time it's edited. But otherwise, maybe I want some time triggers. Maybe I have actions that happen now and actions that happen later. The list of actions is the same. There's just some kind of time dependency to them. And here's what that looks like. When I set up a time trigger, I can choose X number of days or hours before or after, and it doesn't have to be the rule trigger date. It can be other date fields on the object. Before or after the rule trigger date, the date the case is created, the date that their renewal is due for their support plan. What other dates you have on the object, you can use that for your workflow time trigger. Now, any time trigger actions you have that are pending, they sit in a queue until it's their time to go. This is your time-based workflow queue. And I always imagine this queue kind of like jury duty, if you've ever done jury duty in the US. You usually start in a big room of people and you wait until it's your time to go, until it's your time to be called. That's how I picture all of these time trigger actions hanging out in the queue until it's their time to go. One more thing I want to tell you about workflow rules, and that is that workflow rules can do what we call a cross-object field update, where the change on one record can cause a field update on another record. But there are some limitations you'll want to be aware of. In this scenario, I'm drawing on the left-hand side. Let's say I have a cross-object field update. This is one we had at my old company, where when the opportunity stage changes to closed won, there is a cross-object workflow field update that updates the account's record type from a prospect account to a customer account. That is something we can do with a workflow rule. But a cross-object field update with a workflow rule only goes in one direction, where a change on the child causes an update on the parent. Only works in one direction. So keep that in mind. That will be relevant in just a little bit. That takes care of workflow rules for us. And while workflow rules can be helpful for automating those 4 actions that we specified, Process Builder can automate many more actions. So workflow rules, FTEO, field update, task, email alert, outbound message. There is a longer list of actions that Process Builder can automate. It also works on, it can be kicked off by any object in Salesforce. But much like with workflow rule, I still have to start with one particular object. So again, I'm saying the change to which object is going to kick off my process with Process Builder. The change to which object. So in this case, it's opportunity. Whereas a workflow rule is a single if-then statement, because you get one set of criteria for a workflow rule. Process Builder is like multiple if-then statements. And each one of these blue diamonds is what we call a criteria node. If this is true, then do this. If it's not, evaluate the next set of criteria. And much like workflow rules, you can have immediate actions, you can have scheduled actions, but you get multiple if-then statements, multiple sets of criteria, and a process built with Process Builder. Now, as you can see from this on the right, looks a bit different than when I put my workflow rule together. You get this nice visual designer, and you can see it mapped out as you're building it. With workflow rules, we learn that they are non-deterministic. You don't get to control the order of your different actions, of your different workflow rules. With Process Builder, if it's all in one process, I do get to control the order. In fact, you can often combine multiple workflow rules into one process as long as they are kicked off all by the same object. So if I have multiple workflow rules for my opportunity and I put them all into one process with Process Builder, I have just gained the ability to control the order of my actions. And to control that order, I simply click one of these blue criteria nodes and I can drag it up and down to reorder my actions that are tied to that criteria node. So you get control over the order of the actions. In this example, I have an if statement. So if a high value deal is won, my true actions, create a contract, a chatter post, notify VP of sales. And then I have a scheduled action 6 days after a task. But if that's false, if that's not true, I have separate actions that happen. So you get to have multiple if-then statements controlling the order. Another